I call him the blue-collar millionaire. He's also the founder at Investable Wealth, LLC, a fee-only investment advisory firm licensed in the state of Utah. And he also has a podcast, the Wealth Steading Podcast. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, in the suburbs outside of Pittsburgh. This is back in the 1960s, 1970s. My parents and grandparents were blue-collar workers, worked in coal mines and railroads. My dad was a crane operator. I wanted to get out of that lifestyle and joined the military, went to corporate America, ended up being a late blooming entrepreneur.
About your first job in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so out of basic training, out of boot camp with the Marine Corps, I was assigned into aviation ground support, and went to a variety of schools, hydraulics mechanic, diesel mechanic. I eventually ended up getting to be what's called a plane captain. I think you were in the Army. In the Army, I think you guys would call it a crew chief. But in the Marine Corps with fixed-wing aircraft, if you didn't fly, it was called a plane captain. And so I got to work with F-4 Phantoms, and was attached to a fighter squadron for a couple of years while in the Marine Corps. It was really a great experience. I would say that that was a really good foundation for me, and although it kind of was happenstance that I ended up joining the Marines, it was exactly what I needed.
Now, what did you do on that ship all day long?
Yeah, so I was out there in the Cold War days of Ronald Reagan. We were in the Mediterranean on one of my trips, back when we were bombing Gaddafi. So we flew with live missiles and live ammunition. Pilots were flying, 8 hours at a time. It was really an intense time back then. We worked 12 or more hour shifts, and when we were up on the flight deck, either night operations or day operations. I was, I guess you'd call it a glorified gas station attendant. I was responsible for an aircraft, an F-4 Phantom. Whenever it was on the ground, I was the manager of that aircraft. So I made sure that the ordnance got armed. I made sure it was fueled up. I made sure that whenever the pilot got into the cockpit, everything was ready to go for him. I didn't actually perform the maintenance on the aircraft, but I was the plane captain that made sure that all those things were coordinated and taken care of. And then the pilots would get in, would make sure they'd start up, and would launch them off. It was to be a 19-year-old kid. It was really exciting time. I didn't spend all my time on ship. I was only aboard ship for about 10 months. That was just really my most enjoyable part of the Marines. Other than that, I traveled around the U.S. and traveled around the world. I was Westpac and Philippines, Japan, Okinawa. That was all island-based. But again, just jumped around with an F-4 squadron.
And then you didn't stay in the Marine Corps too long, and then you got out and you got your first job working for Exxon.
Yeah, I'm a little different than most people. Like I said, I took a real circuitous path. I did my 4 years in the Marine Corps. I knew it wasn't for me. I wanted to study and learn. That's part of what I learned about being on that ship too. When I had spare time, I started reading. I started educating myself. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to college. Back in those days, they didn't have much of a GI Bill because there weren't a lot of wars going on. So I joined Army ROTC. I ended up owning the Army 3 years of my life. So I got a degree in environmental science from Penn State University. I got out of the Army, and then I went to work for Mobil Chemical, and I spent the next 20 years or so, just about 20 years in industrial sales, working for a variety of companies in the United States and really around the world, working with manufacturers, really taking my blue-collar roots that I grew up with, knowing about machinery and then the things I learned in the military about productivity and efficiency, and applying those to selling products, selling machinery to make things work better, or selling components, raw materials to make manufacturing processes better.
So you thrived at Exxon. You were doing sales. And you learned a lot in the Marine Corps. And remember when we were talking about how, you going into sales, you are an independent operator. They gave you a credit card, and it was basically get out there and get some customers. And that was your 20 years. You really were able to do your own thing. Talk about that, because a lot of...
Yeah, so when you're in sales, most of it is what they call it, baptism by fire. You get thrown in the situation. There's obviously training and things involved, but the great part about sales is, and I encourage a lot of people, if they're not familiar with it, look into it, because there's all types of selling. I was never the back slapping, joke telling, golf course kind of salesman. That wasn't me. We just talked about the Super Bowl. I didn't even watch the Super Bowl. I used to take clients to football games. I didn't even care. I would just buy the food, buy the beer. I wasn't into sports. But you can find a sales role to fit every personality. I think the key skill, the key trait that's needed is persistence. You have to be able to believe in your product and go out and be able to articulately tell people why that product will work for them. And whether you're selling advertising or software or door-to-door sales, it doesn't matter. You've got to be persistent and believe in that product and have your product knowledge and tell people why what you're selling is going to benefit their life. Passion, but it didn't happen overnight. It took me 20-some years to be an overnight success. I encourage people to do that. Follow their passions, make things happen.